All right, so let's get talking about your first jazz piano improv trick. We're going to start off by talking about major pentatonic scales and how we can use them to jazz up our playing a bit. So first, to break down what a pentatonic scale is it is 5 notes out of our major scale. 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 in terms of scale degrees, or do, re, mi, so, and la. And it's called a pentatonic scale because it has 5 notes. So over hour 1, we're going to do something kind of sneaky. We're going to move up our major pentatonic scale by 1 tone. That's really the first trick within these pentatonic scales, is that if you have a major 7th chord, play your major pentatonic scale up a tone. First, let's hear how it sounds. Super jazzy, right? So here's what's happening. We have the 2nd note, or our 9th, as the root of this pentatonic scale. We have our major 3rd, that's important for us to outline the harmony in the left hand. Our sharp 4 or sharp 11, giving more of a Lydian sort of sound. So 2, major 3, sharp 4, then we get our 6 and our 7. So we have a 9, we have an 11, we have a 13, right? Where is it? There. And then we have our 3rd and our 7th. So the 3rd and the 7th really ground the tonality of the left hand. And then we also have some beautiful color tones as well too. So just a really cool sound. So try that over your major 7th chords. Play a major pentatonic scale up 1 tone. Next, let's talk about what we can play over a minor 7th chord. So in this case, let's go about it like we would a 2-5-1. So instead of playing C minor 7, I'll play D minor 7 for our minor 7 example, eventually G dominant 7 for our dominant 7 example, and as I showed you, C major 7 for our major 7 example. So over to D, the trick here is to play a pentatonic scale up a perfect 4th. So from D, we go up a perfect 4th, we have G. And again, very jazzy, very beautiful sounding, it all works. Let's take a look at what's happening under the hood. So the root of this pentatonic scale is our 11 or 4 over our chord, which is a very constant sort of source of resolution over a minor chord. I've done enough transcriptions to see that a lot of jazz pianists are finishing on that 4 at the end of some sort of little solo trick. So it's colorful, but in the case of us thinking of this G pentatonic scale, it feels like we're finishing on the root, but really we're finishing in relation to D on a color tone. So we have that 4, 5, major 6, giving us sort of a Dorian sound, minor scale or natural minor scale with a major 6th, right? And then we have our root, a little bit less common in some of these pentatonic scales because in jazz the root is the safest note and oftentimes we're looking for a more colorful sound, but in this case it works well. And then our 9th. So we do have an 11, a 13, a 9, and then we have our 5 and our root. A little more safe this time, but giving us some variety compared to our 1 chord. So when you're improvising over a minor 7th chord, try a pentatonic up a perfect 4th. So to recap, over the major 7th, we're thinking up a tone, and for our minor 7th, we're thinking up a 4th. Now for the dominant chord, we're actually going to play the same pentatonic that we played over the 2, but this is wildly unadventurous. But I want to quickly talk about why we're going to use that, and then some other options that you might have. So over a G dominant chord, you would play G major pentatonic. Now, that would give us the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 on our chord. What is nice is that we have a 3rd, right, helping us outline the tonality. We have a 9th and a 13th, or a 2 and a 6, helping give us some color, but we're very grounded with this root and 5th. And if you've ever studied dominant harmony and sort of the options that we have to improvise over top of that, you'll realize really quickly that the dominant is where we get away with a lot more. We can be very adventurous with the scale choices that we use. That was, for example, an altered scale or whole tone. So I would say that the tricks that I use the most out of these 3 are the trick for the major 7th chord and the minor 7th chord. For the dominant, if you're stuck, you can use that same pentatonic. And what's really nice is in a 2-5-1, you're thinking 2, play a pentatonic built off of the 5 or up a 4th from the 2. Same over the 5 chord. And then for the 1, then you change it up. So it keeps saying simple for the 2 and the 5, but perhaps too simple. As your ears expand, try some other things. And the other thing too is this G dominant 7th chord. What are the odds it's going to be just a regular G dominant chord? Very often in jazz, we might end up getting something like sharp 11 or a flat 13 or something else, maybe like a flat 9 that we're adding as color over top of the dominant chord. And that would influence what you're going to play over that chord in terms of your pentatonic scale choice. So I would say over the 2 chord, we have something very colorful and kind of paint by numbers jazz. Sounds really cool. Over the 5 chord, we have something very safe, but I recommend over time, be less safe. Try some chromatic approaches, and some of the other tricks that I'm going to show you will combine with this more sort of safe vanilla kind of scale that we've selected here. And then again, over the major 7th, maybe my favorite, improvise with the 2 in mind. So the 2 is providing the root for our major pentatonic. And why I like this one so much is I found for years, I found it very difficult to improvise over a major 7th chord without it sounding kind of corny. We could use some sort of blues run or maybe the Lydian scale, but this eliminates the root, and the 5th gives us plenty of color and still outlines our tonality. So there's a lot of really great tricks built in there. I would recommend trying out a 2-5-1 chord progression in all 12 keys. Over your 2, play your pentatonic up a 4th. Over your 5, play your pentatonic off of the 5's root. And on your 1 chord, play a pentatonic that is up a tone or starts on the 2nd scale degree. So hopefully that's helpful. That's all out of the Jazz Piano book by Mark Levine, as well as just some exploring on my own. If you want to learn more about that, do go into the chapter on pentatonic scales within that book. I'm sure it's probably also in the Jazz Theory book by the same author, but for sure the Jazz Piano book has that. It can be a very dense book in terms of theory, so hopefully I've helped you sort of decode and extract out some of the best nuggets of information regarding these pentatonic scales and how we can use them to jazz up our playing. The last thing I want to say is that for years playing in a rock band and playing funk and pop music, I would constantly use pentatonic scales more associated with the key. So if I'm in C major playing a C pentatonic scale, and it's so refreshing to have practiced those scales for many years, and as much as they weren't applied as well as I would have liked them to, finding out some of these tricks allowed me to use the exact same scales, but just shift it a little bit. And wow, does it ever just sort of open up your jazz playing, helps bring out the color tones, and you're landing on notes that would normally feel resolved, but all of a sudden you're landing on a color tone, and it kind of tricks your brain into coming up with some really cool new licks, riffs, and chops, and hopefully you guys all get to use that to your advantage. So with that all being said, let's get over to the next trick.